How to assert yourself in a text. I'm going to talk about that right after this. Hey everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm Yoel and so grateful to have you. And in today's video, I'm going to discuss a topic that struck me because it's something that just happened to me today in my life, and I figured I would share it with you as always. I was going to say as always, as often is the case. When certain things happen to me, I try to understand and learn from them so that I can grow in my development for the next time. And part of the beauty of having this YouTube channel is that I have the ability to go and share that with you. And hopefully you can learn from that as well. And also I can learn from you if you leave me feedback and comments about insights that you may have to what I'm saying. So the video specifically is going to talk about the idea of how to assert yourself in a text message. Okay, and what happened to me today was that somebody had sent me a message, and I don't want to get into specifics just to protect the privacy of the individual involved, but somebody had sent me a text message, and I felt that that text message overstepped this person's boundary. I didn't feel it was appropriate for this person to send me the text message. And I did send a message back, and I felt that I made some mistakes along the way. And that got me thinking about how I can really, work to assert myself, but do it in a way that benefits myself, benefits the recipient of the message, really serves my spiritual development, because that's really what everything is all about. It's really about progressing and advancing spiritually. Okay, so without further ado, here are some little notes I wrote down for what I think is important to implement when you feel that you want to assert yourself in a text message. Okay, the first thing is when, let's say you're responding to a text message that you received. Okay, now maybe somebody had said something to you in person and later you want to send a text. First of all, you have to even consider if sending a text is the best way to do it. Okay, I hadn't thought of that before as I was preparing these notes, but now that I think about it, sometimes it's better to say certain things face to face, but oftentimes in the busy world that we're in and the way communication is these days with text messaging so prevalent, oftentimes, the easiest, most convenient way to do things is by text message. That doesn't always mean that it's the best way. But for the purposes of this video, we're going to assume that a text message would be a suitable forum for exerting yourself. Okay, so when you're considering the text message or what the person said or did that you want to respond to, that you feel does deserve a response, just make sure to consider it. Don't respond immediately, okay? Don't act out of impulse. Take the time to reflect and make sure that what the person did or said or texted is something that should require a response, that you do feel genuinely, authentically that you're doing it because you feel that you should be asserting yourself here to protect yourself, because that is important as well. Okay, so that's number one, is really to take time to consider and reflect and make sure that responding and asserting yourself here is the appropriate response. Number two, I jotted down here, is when you're preparing this response, to remove the emotional component. Okay, so many times we get lost in our emotions and how we're feeling, and that could come out in the text message as anger. Let's say you send all capital letters or multiple exclamation marks or question marks to really express that anger, the way you can try and express anger in a text message. Okay, really you want to try and remove that emotional component, because if you're doing it from a place of an emotional response, you're really moving away from what the actual message is. You're moving away from that asserting yourself, and you're being more reactive. Okay, and also if you want the message to have a more likelihood of being well received on the other end and landing, and for the other person to really take into consideration what you're saying, you're better served as well for removing the emotional component. Okay, so as you're preparing your response, if you can spot any sort of emotional component in the way you're expressing yourself, whether it's in the usage of exclamation points, as I said, or the words that you're using, it's better to eliminate all that. Okay, because you can make the same point without expressing that anger. You can do it in a way that's avoiding the anger, because you don't want to be responding from a place of anger. You're doing this to assert yourself. There's a difference between asserting yourself and just reacting angrily. So make sure you try and eliminate the emotional component when you're preparing that responding text message. Now, the third thing that I jotted down is kind of similar to the previous point, and that is to remove extraneous information. So in my example today, when I responded, I think I was pretty good about removing the emotional component. I didn't really have a huge emotional response which is great. And by the way, that's something that you learn with consciousness. And I've got a whole video series I'm in the midst of now. If you haven't seen it, you can check out my library of videos. There's a course on Michael Singer's Living Untethered. I actually always have the book handy by my side. Okay, that's Living Untethered. I'm doing a whole course on this book, and he teaches you really how to become more conscious. So, thankfully, because of the lessons in that book that I do my best to incorporate. I'm not a guru and I've got ways to go, but I've definitely come a long way in terms of my consciousness. So the emotional element wasn't there. But after I had sent the text message to this person, I did realize that I had said some information that I regretted. I didn't really have to include in the message. Okay, part of the message really, I wouldn't call it an attack, but it said, again, I don't want to get into specifics to, just to protect the privacy of this person, but really it had information in there that I didn't have to include. It really detracted from the message and wasn't necessary. And I had wished that I had removed it. It ended up being okay. This is kind of secondary to the emotional element. If you respond angrily or reactionary in a certain way, that's probably, in comparison to leaving in too much information, you're probably better off with the too much information than the emotional element. But ideally, you want to not only remove the emotional element, you want to remove any sort of extraneous information that's not on point, that's not relevant to what you're trying to convey. Because again, that's just going to distract you, it's going to distract the recipient of the message, and it's not serving either of you. Okay, so really work to try and remove any sort of extraneous information that's not on point to what you're trying to address. And then you go ahead and you've reflected, and you've made sure that the emotional component isn't there, and the extra information isn't there. So then you've decided to go ahead and send it. Now, once you send it, it's very important to accept yourself for sending it. Okay, now that may sound trite, but again, for me today, after I sent the message, I found myself really in an uncomfortable state. I had a lot of anxiety. And then I realized, as I observed that anxiety, and that's part of what Michael Singer teaches about the idea of observing your emotions. So as I was observing that anxiety, I learned to just breathe through it and relax and release that anxiety by accepting it, by saying, okay, I have anxiety because I'm not used to asserting myself. Okay, I don't assert myself. Perhaps one can say that I haven't asserted myself enough, or if I have asserted myself, I've done it in a very reactive, emotional way, and that's never served me. So this was kind of new territory. And I actually had texted a friend of mine after, just to share with him what my feelings were about this message that I sent. And he actually had expressed that to me, that he felt that he doesn't know for sure, but knowing me as well as he does, and he's a very close friend of mine, he expressed to me that he felt that those feelings were kind of exercising new muscles, because I'm not really used to asserting myself in this way. Okay, so really, if you find yourself feeling uncomfortable or having anxiety, it's very normal, especially if you're not used to asserting yourself, and learn to accept that and be okay with yourself. Don't judge yourself, don't criticize yourself, because then if you do that, in many ways, you could maybe undo that work that you've done to assert yourself, and you may not want to do it the next time when you really should be doing it. Okay, so accept those feelings. Maybe they could be because you don't do it enough. Maybe it could be because like me, I also felt I had included extra information that I wish I hadn't sent. But either way, learn to accept yourself and don't criticize and don't condemn yourself for it. You can actually congratulate yourself for exercising a new muscle that you haven't really exercised before. And finally, what I wrote down here is that it's not for you to worry about the response. Okay, the reason you're doing it is really for yourself. The person may or may not listen to you. The person may respond angrily. That's a consequence that is going to result as a result of you doing what you think is right for you. Not everybody is always going to agree with whatever you feel is right for you. They may not see it as being right for them. Okay, and you're not doing it for that. So if the person responds angrily, then so be it. If the person responds in a sad way, disappointed, upset, as long as you feel that you were authentic in your response and you did it from the truest place, from a true source, then you don't have to worry about how that person's response is going to be. As it happens in my case, despite the fact that I had included the extra information, the person actually ended up receiving the message very well, and the person actually expressed the person didn't really apologize, but expressed that they understand why I responded in the text in the way that I did. Okay, and that, even though I didn't do it for that response, it was actually very gratifying to see that. Okay, I didn't need that validation, but the fact that this message was well received, that's great. That's a nice cherry on top. But again, had the person responded angrily, it definitely would not have been as easy, and it would have been an exercise in consciousness as well to accept that, but that wouldn't have made what I did any less important or any less true. Okay, so as long as you're coming from a true place, from a place of authenticity, don't worry about how the other person receives your message or how they respond to it. Okay. However, if the person in their response maybe makes a good point, maybe they'll point out something in your message that you hadn't considered, and they say, like, you didn't have to say that. You can go back on that message and ask yourself, oh, maybe they're right. Okay, so you don't have to stand on ceremony, and you don't have to be unbending. You can be flexible. Maybe the person does have a good a good point in their response. Okay, but my point is not to worry as long as you feel true to yourself. And if the person just responds in an angry way that's not coherent, or doesn't have any strong points in response, that's not for you to worry about. Okay, now you may find it funny that I'm getting all detailed about a simple text message, right? We send so many, but the point of this video is that even the smallest of things that happen in our lives could be really transformative experiences. A simple text message could be a real building block for you to learn how to assert yourself. I feel like that's what it was for me today, and that could be for you as well. So don't think that learning experiences have to come with these huge awakenings, a near-death experience. I mean, those are great as well, and there's a lot to learn from those too, but you don't have to have a near-death experience in order to grow spiritually. You could learn and grow spiritually from even the smallest of moments in your life, even from something as as insignificant, quote unquote, which really was significant, but something as seemingly insignificant as a text message. Okay, so just to review some considerations you may want to have before sending a text message to assert yourself is really take the time to consider if what you're doing really is necessary in order to make the point that you want to make. If it's necessary to assert yourself, if doing it via text message is the best way to do it. And if it is, then when you're preparing the text message, removing that emotional component, making sure you're sticking to the issues. Number 3 is to remove the extraneous information. Again, sticking to the issues, not getting sidetracked or distracted by other matters that aren't relevant to the point that you're trying to make. Then the next point is to accept yourself, accept the feelings that are arising once you've sent that text message. Remember, it may be simply because you haven't exercised this muscle very much. So accept whatever emotions or feelings you're having after sending the text message. And finally, don't worry about the response of the other person. You're not doing it for a response. You're not doing it for validation. You're doing it because you feel like it was necessary for you to assert yourself. And that's the main point. Always try and be authentic to what it is you're trying to accomplish. And if you're trying to assert yourself, how the person responds to it is not for you to hold. You don't have to worry about it. I do want to point out as well, by the way, that again, it may sound funny that I'm making this whole video out of a simple text message. These types of steps with more practice become more automatic. So it's not like you're taking an hour every time you send a text message to assert yourself. You may get better and better with practice, with repetition. These things may come quicker to you. But when starting out and you're not used to exercising these muscles, these may be some considerations that will help you, just like it helped me in retrospect in sending the text message to realize what I feel the best way is to assert yourself in a text message. So once again, if you have any feedback, what works for you when you're when you're trying to assert yourself, particularly in the form of a text message, what do you think about my suggestions? Have you tried any of them? Do you have other suggestions? I'm always very excited to see the feedback that you leave. I do my best to respond if there's any questions. And as always, I hope that you've gained some insights from this video, and it really helps me to speak it out as well. I appreciate you. If you did appreciate the video, I would be very grateful if you took a second literally to hit that thumb up button, and also to subscribe to the channel. That would definitely help me. There's no doubt about that, but it would also help you to not miss a future video. I've got all sorts of different topics ranging from consciousness, like I mentioned, the new Michael Singer course that I'm doing on Living Untethered, his wonderful book. I also have things of a lighter nature. I've got film reviews and all sorts of topics on pop culture. So check out the videos in my library, and don't forget to come back. Until next time, I'm looking forward to seeing you the next video. Hey everyone, hope you enjoyed that video. I'd be grateful if you subscribe to the channel. You'd not only be helping me, you'd also be helping yourself to not miss a future video. Your comments and feedback are always welcome, and don't forget to hit the actual like button on the video as well. Looking forward to seeing you at the next one.